கண்டியில் தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் டிவி.
To Crossroads on TVI, a show that showcases the Tamil Canadian community, their issues and their successes. I'm your host, Manjula Salvaraja. Manoranjana Kanagasabapathy was tragically killed when a truck crashed into a TTC bus near Steeles and Middlefield in August this year. She had just left a temple and was taking the bus to get to work. The accident also left 13 people injured. Since then, there have been mentions in media that the driver may have been on his cell phone right before the crash. Today, her family and an organization that campaigns against distracted driving join us to talk about this issue. In the studio today is her brother, Kandiah, Manoranjana's daughter, Soruby, and her son, Sivam. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for welcoming us.
It's our pleasure. Joining us via Skype is Karen Bowman, the founder and chair of quite an important organization that has been working on this for a while, advocating on this issue, DropitandDrive, a BC-based organization that is focused on ending distracted driving. Thank you for being here, Karen.
Thank you for having me.
So perhaps, I'm just going to say something to our viewers who may be interested in calling in to share their thoughts on this issue. They can call us at 416-623-8100. Karen, I'll put the first question out to you is, starting off, let's get a definition of what distracted driving is, because I know that the term gets sort of misused in certain ways.
Well, distracted driving is more of a global term. The legislation in BC and the rest of the provinces except Alberta just relate to handheld electronic devices. But distracted driving goes much further than that. It includes being distracted by fiddling with your GPS, adjusting your makeup, grabbing a quick shave on the way into work, reading, writing. Really, it's anything that takes your mind or your hands or your eyes off the task of driving.
Now, what prompted, there's a group of you that have gotten together to work on this with this organization. What prompted that? What are some of the stories of the people involved?
Well, there's three of us who are the main three speakers. There's myself. I founded the organization following having experienced 2 car crashes myself when I first moved to BC from Ontario. So I know what it's like to go through the physical and the emotional trauma when you're hit by somebody. And then just becoming a mom and seeing the risk that this issue was causing to my kids, even on their own school campus, I thought if I could get ahead of the issue, if I could pull together a team of people who could share information in a way that didn't come across as lecturing or overly focused on statistics, but in a way that would get people to care enough to change their behavior. So I was very fortunate to partner with now retired Captain Tim Bailey of the Surrey Fire Services. He spent 27 years on the fire services, literally picking up the pieces from people who have been involved in crashes, preventable ones. And then also I partnered with the Surrey RCMP, and we've got Corporal Brian Federchuk, who is a traffic officer and a motor officer, and each of us brings a very different perspective and very different stories to the issue of distracted driving.
Now, what are some of the stats? This is obviously an important issue, and we hear some of these individual stories, but what are the overall stats that we're looking at, whether it's across Canada or BC or Ontario, that you think makes this a matter of concern?
Well, just recently, it was at the end of August, Ontario came out with the news that distracted driving fatalities have now exceeded drunk driving fatalities. So clearly that's a very disturbing trend that we're seeing. In BC, an average of 91 drivers are killed each year because of distracted driving, and those numbers are just unacceptable on any level.
Now, the interesting part is I actually, right before, throughout the course of the week while I was researching this topic, I looked at cell phone legislation in Canada. And I wanted to get your thoughts on the legislation. Do you think there is enough out there? And do you think it's effective?
Well, I think it's a very important step in the right direction. Legislation has to be in place. Clearly, we can't rely on people's common sense of what is acceptable behavior behind the wheel. So there has to be a way of enforcing a behavior that is, or putting something in place that can get people to behave in a way behind the wheel that is a safe thing to do. And the legislation that's in place across Canada, I find it really interesting. I have all the details up on our website. And the fines range anywhere from $115 up to $280 in Saskatchewan. And I'm curious as to why there's such a variety of consequences across Canada, when really this is a Canadian issue. In fact, it's a global issue. But the legislation's been in place in British Columbia. It'll be 4 years this coming February, and it's clearly not working. And when I'm hearing the same kind of feedback from across Canada, what's in place right now isn't working. Enforcement, they're doing all that they can, but there's simply more of us on the road than there are police officers who can try and change the behavior.
Well, I mean, if you look at the Ontario stats, it's not stats, sorry, the penalties. So it came into place in 2009, but it's basically a fine of $155, and there's actually no demerit points that are associated with it, which came as a bit of a surprise to me. For some reason, I always thought that it was actually far more than that. Do you think that the penalties, and the penalties are not that high in my opinion when I look across the board, do you think that this is enough? Do you think that there ought to be more efforts made on the legislative front, and is there someone working on that?
I think absolutely there's more that should be done, because at the end of the day, the consequences for this risky behavior aren't enough to override people's perceived need to stay connected at whatever cost. And what people aren't realizing is that cost is injury, like what happened to my daughter after I started the program, or fatalities. And it's just, it's really surprising to me that more isn't being done through legal channels to increase the penalties, because some people need a consequence that hits their pocketbook in order for them to change their behavior.
Now, I'm sure that in your work you've looked at other sort of issues of this kind, drinking and driving. Just based on that, do you think it was legislation, and what do you think made the difference to sort of cut down the instances of drinking and driving that we see?
Well, I can definitely speak to BC. I mean, we now have the toughest drinking and driving legislation anywhere in Canada, and the consequences are severe, but they should be severe based on the risk involved with drinking and driving. And distracted driving more and more is being proven to be just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than drinking and driving. So in BC, what we've seen is a drastic reduction in the instances of injuries and fatalities caused by drinking and driving. And I think that's in large part due to not only ongoing education, but how severe the consequences are.
Now, the other, sorry, I'm interrupting here, but the other thing that I'm also curious about is just some of the stories that you've heard working with, I'm sure that many people who are either actually the victims or the people that may have actually caused the crash come to you. What are some of the stories that you can share with us?
Well, it's really interesting. We started out primarily going in to talk to high school kids, not because they're the problem, and they do get painted as being the problem, but we really believe that that generation represents the best chance we have for a solution to the problem. They're the next generation of drivers coming out. So if we can raise their awareness now, then they're going to hopefully be making safer choices and taking that information home to their parents. And after one particular presentation that we did, I remember a young girl, 16, 17 years old, coming up to me in tears, thanking us for coming and sharing the information, because at that very moment, her cousin was fighting for their life in hospital in a coma because someone had hit them and injured them, and that person who hit them was distracted. And it's never our goal to create more pain for anybody, so it really meant a lot that she, in spite of her pain, she was thankful that we were coming in and raising this issue.
So, you know, there is, I mean, you've brought up that legislation is definitely something that needs work, but we've talked about this before too, is this idea of perceptions. I had this interesting experience of, now that I've read up on all of this and I've been looking at it through the week, I notice cell phones everywhere, and I notice people talking on cell phones in cars more than ever. I'm sure it was happening the week before, but this week I've noticed it more than anything. And I thought the funny thing is, when I would see someone and they would make eye contact with me, I didn't feel like they turned away. I didn't feel like there was a sense of shame about it. So I don't know if you have any comments on the perceptions around just even, distracted driving, specifically people talking on their cell phones when they're driving, which is clearly an illegal activity in Ontario.
I think you're absolutely right. There doesn't seem to be any shame or a sense of doing wrong involved with having a cell phone in your hand. I see it all the time when I'm out. Just yesterday, I was stunned to see a public transport driver with his cell phone clearly balanced on the steering wheel and didn't seem to think anything about it. He's well in view of everybody around him and just was more focused on what he felt he needed to do. And I think it's this to a certain level, an arrogance that people are more capable in their driving behaviors than they really are in reality.
Now, could you speak perhaps to the impact that this has on the life of the person that actually causes the accident? Because I think we are definitely going to talk about what could happen with the life of the victim, but what about the life of the perpetrator, for lack of a better term?
The closest I've come to experiencing that is through a story that came out of the States in Utah. Reggie Shaw was a 19-year-old boy who, great kid, good in school, excellent in sports, didn't do anything really bad per se. And one day he just chose to text while driving. And the ending result was 2 men lost their lives. They were fathers, husbands, they were actually rocket scientists. And as a follow-up to that story, the Werner Herzog documentary that just came out recently delves deeper into what his life has been like since he caused these 2 men's deaths. And it's really interesting to see that he just didn't wake up that morning planning on killing 2 people. Very few people in this world thankfully do. And you can see that even years later, he's absolutely torn up about what that one moment's decision did to forever change the lives of the families of the 2 men that he killed. And his life will never, ever be the same again. He can't wake up and not know that he was responsible for killing 2 men.
So that brings me to talking about your organization. I've been reading a bit about it. Perhaps you can share with our audience what your organization does or what you're doing in this area.
Well, we're pretty close. We're about a month within our 3-year anniversary, and our main focus is education. We really want to raise awareness in a reality-based, but not gory or fear-mongering way that helps people of all ages. We have programs that run from elementary school, high school, post-secondary. We work with a lot of companies in big industry to just help raise awareness in a way that it brings people to that aha moment before they have to go through the tragedy themselves. And what we hope through the way we deliver our workshops and provide the information is that our personal stories, what I went through with my daughter, what Tim and Brian have been through, what Brian continues to go through in having to deliver next of kin notifications because of preventable crashes, is that people will be able to learn from what we're sharing without having to go through it themselves. And more importantly, they'll take what they've learned and they'll share it within their families and their own communities, so we can start really spreading this word that it is simply not worth the risk.
What are some of the other things that you would like to see policymakers do in this area?
Increased. I would like to see demerit points in place across Canada. I would like to see consequences be more substantial and more in line with the risk that's involved. Texting and driving is definitely one of the riskiest behaviors. I think it should fall under the criminal code. And I think for repeat offenders, the fine should at the very least double each time. And then there should be similar consequences to drinking and driving. Perhaps the confiscation of vehicles, mandatory sort of road safety training that, the people who are engaging this behavior perhaps have to come through a program like ours where they can see firsthand what their behavior can cause.
The other thing that came to mind during this week is that there are people out there that have jobs that require them to stay connected. Some people are people that are on the road constantly, that that I remember my first job out of school was the same thing. I had to stay connected. You know, it becomes very hard to kind of, even if you believe that yes, distracted driving is something that's not right, you may have obligations that are you know, surrounding your career that ask for you to stay on the phone. You know, what is the message that you have for people or even for companies?
I think they need to have a reality check. I'm very fortunate to know a gentleman out of the States called David Teeter. He works with the National Safety Council, and they've done a lot of research to do with productivity because they understand that companies in particular have a belief system that's been in place for a long time, that in order to provide good customer service or to remain at a productivity level that works well for the company, their employees or their contractors need to constantly stay in contact. And through their studies, what they found is that not only is there not a drop in productivity when people stop using handheld and hands-free technology while driving, but there's an actual increase in productivity because people are focusing on what they're doing instead of trying to juggle the conversation that's happening on the phone with what they're trying to do as they're driving from point A to point B. So I'm really encouraged when we go in and talk to companies. We've had 2 so far on the spot, right at the end of our workshop, get up and commit to changing their policy to increase the information they're putting in there to keep their employees safe. So they're going beyond the need to adhere to law. They're actually looking at, you know what, yes, it's illegal to do this, so we don't want you doing that, but we also want to keep you safe and the communities that you work in safe. So we're going to go one step further, and we're going to put things in place that ensure that you can do your job first and foremost, and the connectivity is something that can be handled in a different way.
So as a final question to you, I mean, thank you so much for joining us. It's been just wonderful having you on. Give us some information about how people can find out about your programs or more about some of the things that you do.
The best thing they can do is go to our website, DropitandDrive.com. I have a contact form on there so they can get in touch with me very, very easily, either by email or by phone. We have a pretty heavy social media presence, so we're on Facebook for more in-depth conversations about the issue, and we're also on Twitter. But basically, I welcome contact and interest about our program and how we can help with the issue from anywhere. And we do travel across Canada on a regular basis. We've been out to Ontario a number of times over the last couple of years and into Alberta. And we just really want to see this program be embraced across the other provinces and more extensively, because based on the feedback we're getting, we are making a difference. And really, that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Karen. It's been a pleasure talking to you. We are going to take a break now. You've been watching Crossroads on TVI with Manjula Salvaraja. Welcome back to Crossroads on TVI. That piece that you saw was a few months ago. We interviewed the director of Urana Ur, Lalitha Krishna, and that was the trailer for Urana Ur. And as a bit of a coincidence, Manoranjana was actually one of the folks that was interviewed for that documentary, and we are here with her family. She passed away in a crash a few weeks ago, and there was some media speculation that it may have been caused by a driver with a cell phone. If you wish to join in on the call, certainly call us to share your thoughts. Our number is 416-623-8100. So maybe I'll start with you, actually, Soruby. Would you like to tell us how there was a memorial yesterday?
Yes, it was yesterday.
Yeah. How did that go?
It was a very calm and peaceful event. It began with a couple of hymns sung, the Panjapuranam, and we had some politicians come in to provide their view and take on distracted driving, and they gave some speeches, followed by lunch.
Okay. And my sense is that like religion was an important part of her life.
Very much.
Yeah.
That's the reason even on the date that she died, she went to the temple. She fasted the whole day and then went to the temple before going to the office, people will not bother too much if they are working on that day. Only they do fasting if it is possible on a weekend.
It's very difficult to fast.
So
isn't
she
it?
did that, and then on empty stomach she went at 11 o'clock. So we felt that she had been a very good person, and even at her demise something good has to come to the society. And that's the very reason that we, even at the memorial service, we brought sort of launched a campaign for distracted driving among the people.
So tell us a little bit about this campaign, Sivam. What are you hoping to achieve with it?
Like, we want to like maybe bring in new laws or like raise the fines for drivers who are like distracted while driving, and also just like educate the general public that like something like this could happen to you, like if you do like drive without paying attention, and like the impacts that it can have on you as well as like the person who you injure.
Yeah, it is exactly what she was sharing as well. So give me a little bit of a background. I think we're all curious about that. A little bit of a background of her, where she was born, her journey to this day.
She was born in Karanagar, that's where we are from. And I remember very well, she was my immediately younger to me.
Okay.
And she was my kid sister. So actually I took her to the primary school, and I then took her to the Wormbury High School after that, then took her to Kalambu and then to Rodo here. And she was very quiet, very kind, helpful, and very religious. And lately she became a music lover too, and then she taught the daughter the violin.
So was she always someone who had she learned the violin before when she was?
No,
No,
my sister
actually-
doesn't know music, but she loves music.
Wow,
Yeah.
okay.
She would have learned music had there been opportunities back home,
Yeah.
but here there's plenty of opportunities, so she was able to afford that to the children.
Interesting. And so were you received this musical education?
Yes.
Yes, actually she had told me when she was younger she actually did want to learn the violin. So that's why she didn't have the opportunity then. So when I grew up, she showed it to me and sent me to classes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did she play herself, or she wanted you to play?
No, she wanted me to play. She had the interest from her childhood, but she never had the chance to go to classes there back home. So when I grew up, she passed it on to me.
So what was it like? I mean, she was interviewed for that documentary because she spoke of her journey from coming to Sri Lanka and coming here, right? I mean, speak to me about her transition from there to here.
It is both bittersweet, I would say.
Okay. And
she
why is that?
That is, she was relieved of the pain and agony that she had because of the civil war in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
But in the meantime, she also lost the place where she grew up. It's like taking a fish out of the water and putting it in the sand.
Yeah.
So their environment, what do you call the habitat, she was supposed to be from Sri Lanka and Karanagar, and now she has to come and live in North Pole, basically, in Canada.
Yeah, yeah.
So that kind of stuff has definitely is a bittersweet. Even there are good things and bad things. So that's basically the
And when did she
transition.
move here?
1991.
Okay, so it was a little bit
Yeah.
later.
But
later,
she had
right.
both the kids, so she was too busy with them. They were young. I think she was around 5 years old, and
Yeah.
Sivam was around 1 year or 6 months.
One.
So she was too busy, so she couldn't bother about the Canadian winter or anything like that.
You had to do what you had to do.
So
Yeah.
by the time they grew up, she eased into the Canadian way of life.
Okay. And Sivam, there's an interesting part in that documentary when she says that she still considers that home. And someone recently that I spoke to said that they always felt that she was someone who was very close to her culture, and that's why they asked me to show that clip. What are your thoughts about her in that aspect?
Yeah, like she was very close to her homeland. Like whenever like we eat something that she'd always bring up that topic and say how like it reminds her of like back in the day when she was there and stuff. Like every time like she would eat something, she'd always comment about that. And then like I would always say to her like, "Mom, like you always say this every time. Like please
It's like
stop."
a broken record.
Yeah,
Like a broken record,
Every
yeah.
time, like it can be anything, like from like the most expensive like food or even something simple. Like, she would say, "Oh, like I remember eating this like many years ago." Like
Yeah, because that's how
She wanted to drive that into him because she thinks he doesn't get it.
Okay, so
But-
she wanted to make sure that it was passed on,
Yeah, yeah.
right? It's so let's talk about the accident itself a little. I mean, what was going through your mind when you heard the news?
I was in Montreal at the time, and it's a sheer shock. You wouldn't have expected this to happen, and when we slowly got the information, how did this happen and everything else. So I don't know what to say and what to think. I was in a state of shock, like anybody else would feel it. So we wanted to find out what has happened, how did this happen, why did this happen, and that's something that we are unable to find the answer, and we will never be able to find the answer. Why did this happen? Other than that, if you want to ask me how did this happen, we can tell the truck driver was going apparently according to the reports and the witnesses that we have heard in the reports, he was going at a very high speed.
And he was
Probably,
on Steeles.
He was going on Steel on eastbound, and talking on the cell phone. This is according to the witness reports in the media, and even yesterday's Toronto Star, one of the police detective has mentioned that they have heard the witness saying that the driver was on the phone.
Okay.
And apparently they are actually asking for records from the telephone service provider to find out the information whether the phone
Whether
was
this is
in
what
use or
happened.
not.
Yeah, that's true. That information is available.
And the Middlefield traffic light was red. The Steelbound traffic light was red, and he was going eastbound, and all the eastbound traffic was stopped at the traffic light, and he was in a mighty hurry. He just veered to the left instead of going right and going to the bush. He veered left and proceeded further east against the westbound traffic. Thank God there was no westbound traffic because they were stopped on the other side of the Steel.
So he actually crossed over on the intersection.
Yeah, then he was lucky even to cross over the intersection, because by the time he reached the intersection, the Middlefield traffic came to red. Then only they give the green light to the Steel traffic, which was stopped before.
Yes. Yeah.
So by the time he went to the intersection, the Middlefield traffic stopped. Then he proceeded further, and all of a sudden the eastbound traffic, the westbound traffic on Steel Road that was stopped for traffic light, they got a shock. There was a truck in front of them all of a sudden. They don't expect anything. So then the truck veered again, then hit the post and the bus. That's how the accident happened. This is what you call weird. Nobody can explain.
Yeah, it is a strange
And the
sequence.
funny part is, not the funny, but the serious part is, this person could have, any common man would think, this person had enough opportunities and time to stop the vehicle, and probably nowadays the brakes are very good. We are wondering why this person couldn't stop the vehicle.
So Soruby, Sivam, perhaps you can talk about what it was like that day when you got the news.
I actually lived separately from them, so my brother had given me a call. It was almost, I couldn't believe it. I still couldn't believe it when I reached there. It was so tragic, so sudden, so unbelievable.
Now, it's both of you are her only children, is that
Yes.
right? And your father, how is he faring?
He's coping, but under the circumstances, it's not one of the best, I would say, but he's coping slowly. I guess time is what we need.
What you need?
Yeah.
So Sivam, what are your thoughts about the accident itself?
I'm still in shock, because I was actually home because the cops came and told us about that this happened. So I was home, and then I was in my room, and then my grandma came and called me. Oh, the cops are outside. So I was like, why, right? I was confused, I don't know. So I go, and then the cops asked me, am I her son and stuff? So I was like, yeah. And then, as soon as the cop said, there's no easy way of saying it. So right there, I knew, something was something serious, because I always see this in movies and stuff where cops would go to the victims' families. So I knew, and then when they said it, I just stood there. I was in shock, and I knew my life would never be the same ever again. And how this was going to impact me so much that I probably don't even know right now how much that this is going to impact my future life.
Because I'm guessing too, in this month you had a lot, like family around you, a lot of support. It may be a little bit harder, you know, once
After
that
this.
kind of veers away, right? So now talk to me about the campaign. Sivam's already started. I mean, I think Karen mentioned it too when I called her to learn more about this issue, that it's amazing that some families wait for 2 to 3 years before they decide, okay, we are ready now to work on this issue that caused the death of our family member. Some people decide not to, but she was amazed and very hopeful that you've decided already to talk about this. Why do you think that's important?
We were angry, so in a sense, in a positive way, and we don't want this anger to be channeled in a negative way. So we thought this is the best way to channel our anger and anxiety, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what are the other words. So because we felt we should do something and to correct the situations, and this seems to be our healing process also.
Okay.
And I'm glad, and we are not going to start our own organization or something, because I know whenever we figure out something, we will realize that there is already so many people are doing it. So I'm glad that you found out this organization, and definitely will contact them and then see how we can cooperate with them. And we contacted CAA already, and I spoke to CAA.
They do active
person
work in
who
this
is in
area
charge
too.
of this distracted driving. I think they call the program missing or something. And then we may just get involved with on a political level at different levels, so that they will become more serious, because politicians always want political pressure that is coming from the people and also the numbers. So we will try and provide that to them. And also Karen mentioned something that they were already doing at the school, and I feel it's a mindset that has to be changed. People think it is harmless to speak on the phone. They must realize it is harmful. So from harmless feeling to harmful feeling, we had to bring them. So it should start from home. I think she started at high school. I think we can even start at, we should campaign so that people will start at home, so the children, as they grow bigger, as they are growing, they will realize, like any other good habits, they had to learn this is not something that we shouldn't do. It's like you shouldn't tell lies, something like that. They must feel as it's a basic thing that you should not do it.
That has to be ingrained in them. So,
from the small age, so that you don't have to break the already formed habit.
What's interesting, because if you look at it, I would say, I mean, I'm going to ask both of you, because you are young and you have your peers as well. Do you think the legislation, as I mentioned, has been in place since 2009 in Ontario, making it illegal? Before that, you saw tons of people talking on their phone, right? Do you think that's changed the behavior of people around you?
Of making cell phone usage illegal.
Yeah.
I do still see lots of people on the phone as I'm driving still. I think in a way it is moving forward, and some people have, I'm not going to say not everyone has changed, but I still think we can put tougher laws out there, increasing penalties, maybe increasing demerit points for using cell phones.
So you do think that there has to be some change in legislation?
Definitely, yes.
Sivam, do you have something?
Yeah, I think like they should maybe raise the fines and like make the drivers think twice before using it, because now like I think most people think that they probably won't get caught, but that's probably the main reason why, because I'm sure everyone knows that it's wrong, but they just feel like that they won't get caught, or right? So
Or if they get caught, they
it's just
get
a simple
charged. I
fine
think it's
and-
$155.
yes.
Yeah.
It is not deterrent enough.
I don't, well, I mean, I'm going to have the same
Yeah.
opinion as you.
Yeah.
That I was shocked at how little it
Yeah.
was. I thought it was demerit points
Yeah.
for sure, and
Yeah.
it's not.
And I may just add, since the legislation in 2009, there is so much, the conditions have changed so much. So in the last 4 years, the more gadgets are coming up, and there's more peer pressure for people to use the gadgets. And people are receiving texts in so many different ways, and so we had to use the same peer pressure to work the other way around. That is, as much as the peer pressure was forcing them to use a phone, we had to use the peer pressure to avoid using the phone while driving. That people should look down, and there must be a negativity people should feel so that they will stop using the phone. I think you mentioned that people don't feel ashamed when you make an eye contact, but because we
But
will
if they were
normally-
holding a beer and
if you're doing
driving and
something
you
bad,
looked,
we
they
will
would be
avoid the eye
ashamed.
contact. But here, so we had to bring the feeling. So there must be an influence that can be done only by campaign and
More than legislation, I agree. It can't
Yes.
be legislation alone.
because we can't legislate sanity.
Yeah.
That's a problem, or
Yeah.
common sense.
Yeah. What was that when we spoke on the phone? What was that Kannadasan song?
Oh,
that you-
Kannadasan. I know this. Even though it's a Tamil program, sorry, English program, I will say it in Tamil, but being largely maybe a Tamil audience. Kannadasan என்ற பாடகர் சொல்லியிருக்கிறார். எல்லாருக்கும் கண்ணதாசன் very தெரியும். கள்ளனாய் பார்த்து திருந்தாவிட்டால் களவை ஒழிக்க முடியாது என்று.
Okay, and you can translate it for
Unless the thief changes his habit to good habits, you can't avoid the thefts. Thief has to decide that he is going to change for good. Until then, you can avoid or eradicate 100%. Otherwise, when there is nobody's watching, they are still going to steal.
Got it.
People say that the reason that people don't do bad things is because of lack of opportunities. If there is opportunity, they will commit. So that's basically his basic philosophy.
Interesting way to tie that in. And we're going to hold that thought for a bit. Take a break. You're watching Crossroads on TVI, and we'll be back with the family right after the break.
We hear a lot about multitasking. It's a good thing to be a good multitasker, and we're all challenged to do that, especially today with the kind of mobile communications technology we have available to us. What researchers are finding out is that the human brain really does not multitask. It sequentially tasks. It goes back and forth from one difficult task to another. Now, this doesn't apply to things like walking and chewing gum, but two cognitively demanding tasks the human brain cannot do at the same time. It goes back and forth. I like to call it toggle tasking, and some people are better at that than others, but at any given moment, the brain has to be focused on only one of those tasks. We now know, we never knew this before, we didn't have any reason to know it, but we now know that the act of a telephone conversation, a conversation with somebody who is not in your environment, is more cognitively demanding than we ever dreamed. And we've always known that driving a vehicle is cognitively demanding. So the brain's got to choose one, can't do both. And if an event happens while driving a vehicle and you don't respond to it as quickly or as well as you should, the consequences are huge. It can result in death, loss, serious injury. It's a very, very serious thing. A good example, I ask people, I say, can you watch your favorite television show or movie? Be engaged in it, follow it closely while you talk to somebody on the phone. People say, no, I got to choose one or the other, and that's the exact point. If that's the case, how can we expect to drive a 5,000-pound vehicle through a dynamic, always changing environment where the smallest mistake could result in serious injury?
Welcome back to Crossroads on TVI. We're speaking to the family of Manoranjana, who passed away in a crash a few weeks ago. As we mentioned before, there has been some media speculation that it may have been caused by a driver with a cell phone, and they've been gracious enough to join us in the studio to talk about this. So let me put a question out to both of you. What's a message now that you're in the middle of this experience, and it's only a month, it's still relatively early. What's a message that you want to pass to the driving community out there? Sivam?
I would say that I used to think that something serious like this would never happen to me in my life or my family, because you would always hear stuff on the news, and I would always just say that's not gonna happen to me. But I just want people to know that something serious like this could happen to you, and while you're driving, you should be careful, because like I said before, the impact can be huge for yourself and for others.
And I know that you're a relatively new mother. Your daughter's about 1 year. So what has the impact on your life been of losing your own mother?
Definitely a great loss to me and my daughter, actually. She lost her grandma, I lost my mother. Usually when I have any doubts or any questions, I would just call, Amma, what should I do today? What should I do for this? I mean, now that person is missing, so I've definitely a great loss.
So what would you say is your message to policymakers? I mean, you're going to be approached. There were politicians yesterday at the memorial.
Yes.
This is a contentious topic because some people feel there's not enough being done.
Okay, I can see that gun legislation in states, Obama is trying every time there's a shooting, but there's a what do you call the Rifle Association or something, National Rifle Association. The lobby is so huge and they are unable to bring that legislation. Same is here in distracted driving. I don't know what, if there is any other lobby like that. I don't know, politicians have always problem bringing good legislation. There is some kind of opposite power
Some
that
resistance.
is holding it back or resistance. Here we had to put pressure and to the politicians, and politicians always look at these numbers and statistics. I tell them, one is too many. Don't worry about, we have enough numbers already if you want to bring any good legislations. That's one. Then we had to bring the people, so you asked me about the policies. The other one is politicians should understand the conditions always changing from the time that they have passed the legislations. Now if you know, I think there's a scientist on Intel Corporation, they said every chip, the capacity doubles every 18 months. Something like here, the invention and the explosion of these new gadgets and with so much new features is coming out so fast every 6 months, not 18 months.
So the legislation hasn't probably changed since
It doesn't
2009.
change every 6 months.
Yes. Meanwhile,
so they
you're
should
right.
anticipate these kind of things and far-reaching legislation they have to bring in. Okay, anticipating this, because by the time legislation comes in, it is only fixing 10-year-old behind problems. Now, the way the phones are working right now is actually pushing the people to take the phone, answer me or something like that. It's kind of pressure. It's like the peer pressure. This is a phone pressure.
Oh, there's an addictive nature to phones.
Yeah, this is
for
addictive
sure.
nature. So they had to cut the crap and say, hey, come on, we lived with these kind of things, without all these things, had a great life. Because I see when I walk into my office, people always, okay, when I go to the lunchroom or cafeteria, everybody, or when you are in the line, instead of saying hello to the people and hey, hello, how are you? Or hello, honey, how are things? They are always looking at the phone. What life is all about? Can you do something with the phone? You can't make anything with the phone except just reading and pretending you are doing something great. This is a fallacy. They should get out of this. There is more to life than looking at somebody else's creation on the phone all the time. That's what people have to take this. This is, I think, liberal arts is very important in studies. I think that is probably lacking. People don't understand what life is all about, what is important. I think that, as I said, it all has to start from home.
So you think, so I mean, we've spoken about legislation, we've spoken about, you know, you personally asking people to say, cut down on this behavior. You know, how do you think that education can happen? Because it's easy for us to sit around and say,
okay,
you know,
that is true. Okay, I know it is great, but the reason I rely that education will help is because they have already done it. The people who did it is Mothers Against Driving.
That's true. About against drunk driving. That's
20
true.
years ago, I remember very well. People come to the office on Monday morning after the weekend parties. Hey, we were driving from far away, like they can say, I'm coming from Cottage and drive all drunk and okay, after finishing a whole bottle of whiskey or something like that. Okay, and it's a cool thing to do near the water coolers. Right now, if anybody says this, they won't even say it nowadays. They will dare say that kind of stuff because it is a taboo.
It's such a faux pas.
People will look down on you and they will not talk to you after that. Okay, they won't even get into his car if he's driving.
Or he'll be talked about, and
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
The same kind of negativity has to be brought by the different kind of campaigns, because this has done by not only Mothers Against Driving. I think they largely did this, and I am sure, I don't know the other organization, but I'm sure there are other organizations, government bodies, they must have done all
And
this.
it's a strictly awareness campaign.
It's strictly awareness campaign on simply changing the people's minds and hearts. Okay, and this will take time because the gadgets itself are new. So people are sort of, what do you call that, feeling as soon as you see something new, you want to see what it is. It's like people lining up from the middle of the night if there's a new Apple iPhone. It's not Apple iPhone new one, it's just a new version of an old iPhone. Still people are lining up and 2 million is snapped up. I don't understand this craziness.
I think, you know, there is some research, I can't seem to quote it now, but there is some research that says there's a level of addiction we have
this
to
is
that
only
message
addiction,
that
yeah.
says, you have a new email or you have a voicemail. Apparently there's something that we have to put things aside to check that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, in every way, if you can see, they just had to step back, and if they buy it 1 day later, what is the big deal? That kind of stuff. So if they can, because when they are texting the message or receiving a message and reading the message, they had to think whether text is important or a precious life is important.
Yeah.
Because that is how they should think when they are taking the text. Right now they don't think, they don't realize it. The campaign should do it and campaign will do it.
So let me ask you a final question. How are you going to remember your sister?
I will remember the way I know her from back home. I did lots of things because my mother will go away. I had to take her. I was a babysitter for her. Even though I was only 5.5 years older than her, and if my mother is going away, I will take care of her. Then I was taking her to school, and she's my project, basically. Okay, that's how I'm going to remember.
And you guys have done a gracious thing. I heard that there is a positive thing that you're actually going to be donating some funds from the family. Can you tell us about that?
We are going to, in her memory, we are going to set up a trust fund in Karanagar. That's where we are from, and my sister also naturally is born and bred there, for youth development. So whatever the revenue that will come from this 15 lakhs, and these funds may, grow with the time. And we want to help the young generation, and if we can help the young generation, that will help the society.
Great. And it's a place that she cared about very much.
Yes,
too.
definitely.
Thank you so much for coming on. We're
Thank
very
you for inviting
appreciative.
us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and please, if there's more that happens with this campaign, please keep us posted. We'd
will.
love to hear more.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. Thank you. And we are going to share some final thoughts for the day that inspired us. Yesterday, Lennon Sivam's movie, A Gun and a Ring, had its premiere. A lot of people are doing reviews today on that movie for the very deserving cast and the work that was done. However, we wanted to credit another group that people haven't mentioned yet. When we were there in person, we were told that around 800 people bought tickets for the premiere. There were 3 to 4 theaters that were showing the film, and there was a huge buzz in the hallways before and after. So today we want to salute those 800 people who bought tickets for their dedication and support to a team of local artists. Yes, all 800 of you blew us away. Thank you all for joining us. You've been watching Crossroads on TVI with Manjula Salvaraja.
One of the really good questions that I frequently get on this is that, cell phone use went way up in the last decade, but crashes actually went down a little bit. And if it's so dangerous to use a cell phone while driving, if you're 4 times more likely to crash, which is what the research says, why haven't crashes just spiked? How could they possibly go down? And you know what? On the surface, that's a great question. But if you think about it a little bit, the premise of the question implies that nothing has been done to reduce crashes. And a tremendous amount of things have been done to reduce crashes, especially in the last 10 years. If you look at vehicle technology, we've got anti-lock brakes and airbags and seat belts, and those two don't reduce crashes, but they reduce fatalities, and fatalities have gone down a little bit too. And we've got stability control, and we've got lane departure warnings, and we've got blind spot warnings, and on and on and on. All of that stuff has come in our vehicles in the last 10 years. Our roadways have become a lot safer. We're building more roundabouts, which cause much less serious crashes when there's a crash in an intersection. We've got center lane reflectors. We've got lane departure rumble strips. All of that stuff has become more prolific in the last 10 years. We're doing things to help drivers behave better. We've got high visibility enforcement for seatbelt use and driving under the influence. We enforce driving under the influence more than we ever have. So all of that has come about in the last 10 to 15 years. But in that time, our crashes and our fatalities per mile driven have stopped declining at the rate they were prior to that. They've been declining dramatically since the 1950s, and in the last 10 years it's kind of leveled out a little bit. Maybe that's because
நரங்கெங்கும் தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் டிவி.